April 18, 1945. A makeshift processing center for German prisoners of war hastily established in a requisitioned schoolhouse near Duisburg, Germany. Rain, a cold and relentless spring drizzle, turns the courtyard into a quagmire. The air is thick with the smell of wet wool, diesel fumes from idling GMC trucks, and the lingering scent of cordite from a battle that ended only hours ago. For the men of the U.S. Ninth Army's 788th Military Police Battalion, the war is far from over. It has simply changed shape. The enemy is no longer a fighting force, but a flood of humanity, broken, starving, and surrendering in droves from the collapsing Ruhr pocket. Sergeant Frank Miller stands under the meager cover of the schoolhouse awning, a Lucky Strike cigarette cupped in his hand against the damp. He's been on his feet for 36 hours, processing thousands of weary soldiers from the Wehrmacht and what's left of the Luftwaffe ground crews. His eyes, gritty with exhaustion, scan the latest column of prisoners shuffling towards the intake tables. They are a predictable sight: old men of the Volkssturm, boys from the Hitler Youth with fear in their eyes, and haggard, hollow-cheeked veterans who know the game is up. But then, his gaze locks onto one figure that breaks the pattern. She is a woman, a young woman, perhaps 20 or 21, dressed in the gray uniform of a Luftwaffe Helferin, an auxiliary of the German Air Force. Her blonde hair is plastered to her forehead by the rain, and her face is pale, almost translucent. But it isn't her presence that holds Miller's attention. It's the way she moves. She walks with a peculiar, rigid gait, her legs held unnaturally straight, her knees refusing to bend. Each step is a short, stiff-legged shuffle, a waddle that looks both comical and agonizing. She moves like a marionette with locked joints, her upper body swaying slightly to compensate for the lack of flexion in her legs. A sheen of sweat covers her brow, glistening even in the dull, overcast light, a stark contrast to the chill in the air. Miller takes a final drag from his cigarette and flicks it into a puddle. Something is wrong. He's seen every kind of injury imaginable: shrapnel wounds, burns, frostbite, trench foot. This isn't that. This is something else. He watches as she reaches the front of the line. A corporal motions for her to place her bag on the table. She does so with a pained grunt, bending stiffly from the waist like a wooden soldier. Another prisoner bumps into her and she winces, a sharp intake of breath hissing through her teeth. Her hands fly to her thighs instinctively, as if to steady something. Sergeant Miller pushes himself off the wall. He walks over to the table, his boots squelching in the mud. He stands in front of the young woman. "Name?" he asks, his German functional, if heavily accented. "Anneliese Schmidt," she replies, her voice barely a whisper. She refuses to meet his eyes, staring instead at a spot on his chest. "Are you injured, Fräulein?" Miller asks, his eyes narrowing. He gestures towards her legs. "You're walking strangely." She shakes her head quickly, too quickly. "No, I am fine, just tired." But she's not just tired. She's in pain. He can see it in the tight set of her jaw, the tremor in her hands, the beads of sweat that now trace paths down her temples. A prisoner in pain is not unusual, but a prisoner lying about it? That sets off alarms. Miller has been trained to look for the unusual, the detail that doesn't fit. In this sea of resigned defeat, Anneliese Schmidt is a glaring anomaly. The instinct that has kept him alive from Normandy to the Rhine is screaming at him. This woman is hiding something, and his job is to find out what it is before it becomes a problem for his men. He points a thumb toward a wooden bench a few feet away. "Have a seat over there. We'll get to you." Her eyes widen in panic, a flicker of raw terror that she cannot conceal. The charade is about to crumble.
The processing hall smells of unwashed bodies, wet canvas, and stale cigarette smoke. It's a chaotic symphony of languages. American GIs shouting orders, weary Germans responding in monotones, the occasional crackle of a field radio in the corner. Sergeant Miller leads Anneliese Schmidt away from the main line, his hand resting lightly on her elbow. He feels the tension in her arm, a rigid resistance to his guidance. She continues her strange, stilted walk, each step a carefully measured, painful effort. He gestures again to the simple pine bench against the wall, its surface worn smooth by generations of schoolchildren. "Sit down," he orders, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. The other prisoners in the room barely notice, lost in their own worlds of hunger, fatigue, and uncertainty. But for Miller, this moment is the entire world. The young woman stands frozen before the bench, her breathing shallow and rapid. Her eyes dart from the bench to Miller's face and back again, like a cornered animal searching for an escape route that isn't there. I would prefer to stand," she says, her voice trembling. Miller's patience, worn thin by days of endless work and little sleep, is beginning to fray. I didn't ask what you prefer. I gave you an order. Sit down. He enunciates each word slowly, deliberately. The MPs under his command are watching now, their casual chatter ceasing. They sense the shift in the atmosphere. This is no longer routine processing. This is a confrontation. Anneliese Schmidt shakes her head, a tear tracing a clean path through the grime on her cheek. Please, she whispers. I can't. Miller's patience, worn thin by days of endless work and little sleep, is beginning to fray. I didn't ask what you prefer. I gave you an order. Sit down. He enunciates each word slowly, deliberately. The MPs under his command are watching now, their casual chatter ceasing. They sense the shift in the atmosphere. This is no longer routine processing. This is a confrontation. Anneliese Schmidt shakes her head, a tear tracing a clean path through the grime on her cheek. Please, she whispers. I can't. Miller's patience, worn thin by days of endless work and little sleep, is beginning to fray. I didn't ask what you prefer. I gave you an order. Sit down. He enunciates each word slowly, deliberately. The MPs under his command are watching now, their casual chatter ceasing. They sense the shift in the atmosphere. This is no longer routine processing. This is a confrontation. Anneliese Schmidt shakes her head, a tear tracing a clean path through the grime on her cheek. Please, she whispers. I can't. You can't. Miller steps closer, lowering his voice. Why can't you? Are you hiding a weapon? Is that it? Are you wired with something under that skirt? The possibilities race through his mind. A last desperate act of sabotage, a concealed pistol, a grenade. In the chaotic death throes of the Third Reich, anything is possible. Fanaticism dies hard. He has seen teenage boys try to charge machine gun nests with a single potato masher grenade. A seemingly harmless female auxiliary could be the most dangerous threat of all. She flinches at the accusation, her face a mask of misery and fear. No, nothing like that. I swear. Then sit down and prove it. A wave of dizziness seems to wash over her. She sways on her feet, her hands pressing hard against the sides of her thighs. Her entire body is a coiled spring of agony. To Miller, it looks like a supreme act of defiance. To Anneliese, it is a desperate battle against gravity and the sharp, punishing weight strapped to her body. She knows that if she bends her knees, the game is over. The bindings might slip. The contents might shift, creating a sound, a bulge, that would betray everything. Hours. She has been walking for hours, marching in a column of defeated soldiers, standing for what felt like an eternity, all while maintaining this excruciating posture. Her muscles are screaming, on the verge of complete failure. I can't, she repeats. It's no longer a refusal. It's a statement of fact, a plea. Please, Sergeant. I am in great pain. Miller has reached his limit. The risk is too great. He signals to two of his men, Corporal Davis and Private O'Malley. Take her to the infirmary tent. Tell Captain Davies I have a prisoner who is either seriously injured and won't admit it, or is concealing something I want found. Don't take your eyes off her. The two MPs move in, each taking one of her arms. She doesn't resist, seeming almost to collapse with a strange mixture of terror and relief. The decision has been taken out of her hands. As they begin to lead her away, her stiff-legged waddle seems even more pronounced. Every jarring step sends a shockwave of pain through her. Miller watches them go, the mystery deepening with every awkward shuffling footstep. He notices how she tries to hold her skirt close to her legs, a futile gesture. As she passes a pile of discarded German equipment, her foot catches on a helmet strap. She stumbles, lurching forward. And from beneath the thick gray wool of her uniform skirt comes a sound. It is not loud, but in the momentarily quiet hall, it is utterly distinct. A strange, muffled, metallic clanking. The sound of solid objects knocking together. It is a sound that has no place coming from a human body.
The journey from the schoolhouse to the medical tent is a short but agonizing ordeal for Anneliese Schmidt.
Each step on the uneven, muddy ground is a fresh wave of torture. The weight strapped to her legs feels like it has doubled, the edges of the hard objects digging mercilessly into her skin. Corporal Davis and Private O'Malley support her, their grips firm, their faces a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. They heard the sound too. It was unmistakable. The sound of metal on metal. Now she is no longer just a prisoner. She is a puzzle they are determined to solve. The infirmary tent is an oasis of relative calm and stark efficiency amid the chaos. The air smells sharply of carbolic acid and antiseptic. Cots are lined up in neat rows, occupied by wounded men, both German and American. In the center of the tent, working under the bright glare of a portable surgical lamp powered by a humming generator, is Captain John Davies of the Army Medical Corps. He is a man in his late 40s, with tired lines etched around his eyes, and a quiet, methodical manner that reassures the injured and unnerves the malingerers. He looks up from dressing a soldier's wound as the MPs guide Annalise into his workspace. Sergeant Miller arrives just behind them, his expression grim. "Captain," he says, dispensing with pleasantries, "this is the prisoner I mentioned. Refused to sit. Says she's in pain but won't say why. When she stumbled, we heard a clanking sound coming from under her skirt." Davies raises an eyebrow. He's seen soldiers hide all sorts of things, extra rations, stolen watches, even live ammunition. But the description of her walk and the sound intrigues him. He wipes his hands on a clean cloth and turns his full attention to the young German woman. She stands before him, trembling, her face ashen. "All right, Fraulein," Davies says, his voice gentle but firm. "Let's have a look at you. Can you tell me what's wrong?" Annalise just shakes her head, silent tears streaming down her face. Her ordeal has stretched on for too long. The physical pain is now matched by a crushing psychological exhaustion. The will to resist has evaporated, replaced by a profound sense of dread. "Let's get you onto the examination table," Davies says, gesturing to a sturdy wooden table covered with a rubber sheet. "Corporal, give me a hand." Getting her onto the high table proves to be a challenge. She cannot bend her knees to use the small step. The two MPs have to physically lift her, her body held as rigid as a board. She lets out a sharp cry of pain as they place her on the table, the movement causing whatever is under her skirt to shift again with another, clearer clatter. It sounds like a bag of heavy tools being dropped. Miller and Davies exchange a look. This is no small item. "Okay, Sergeant, stay here," Davies instructs. "Everyone else give us some room." He draws a canvas screen around the examination table, creating a small, private space. Inside are only Davies, Miller, and the terrified young woman lying stiffly on the table. "I'm going to have to examine your legs, Fraulein," Davies says calmly. "I need to know what's causing this. I need you to lift your skirt." Annalise lies frozen, her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at her sides. She stares at the canvas ceiling of the tent, her breathing coming in ragged gasps. This is it, the moment of discovery, the culmination of all her fear, all her pain, all her desperate hope. Davies waits a moment, then realizes she is incapable of complying. With a resigned sigh, he takes the hem of her heavy wool skirt in his hands. Sergeant Miller leans in closer, his hand instinctively moving towards the .45 pistol on his hip. Neither man knows what to expect. A bomb, a collection of knives, a radio transmitter. The air is thick with anticipation. Slowly, methodically, Captain Davies begins to lift the fabric. First, her muddy boots come into view, then her thick gray stockings. He raises the hem higher, past her knees, towards her upper thighs. And then they see it. At first, it's just a confusing mass of brown packing tape and strips of torn bedsheets, wrapped tightly around her legs from just above the knee to the top of her thighs. The bindings are so tight they have cut into her skin, causing angry red welts and raw abrasions. But it's what is held within these crude bindings that makes both men stop breathing. Pressed against her flesh, secured by the tape and cloth, is a bizarre and astonishing collection of metal objects, their surfaces glinting dully in the lamplight.
For a long moment, there is only silence inside the canvas enclosure, broken by the distant hum of the generator and Annalise's quiet sobs. Captain Davies and Sergeant Miller stare, utterly dumbfounded, at the spectacle revealed on the young woman's thighs. This is not a weapon of war. It is a museum of a lost life. Taped to her right leg is an arsenal of domesticity. 6 heavy silver forks, 6 matching knives with ornate handles, and a large, elaborately engraved serving spoon. Tucked among them is a silver christening cup, tarnished with age, and a delicate silver-backed hairbrush. Her left leg is a treasury of personal heirlooms. A thick gold locket, its surface warm against her skin, is held in place by a crisscross of tape. Several gold and silver chains are wound around her leg like metallic vines, their pendants and charms digging into her flesh.
A man's heavy gold pocket watch is taped flat against her inner thigh, its chain wrapped around a small leather pouch. The pouch, Miller would later discover, contains a handful of gold coins, Reichsmarks from a bygone era, and a pair of delicate pearl earrings. It is a fortune. Not a vast one, but a lifetime's worth of accumulated wealth, of anniversaries, birthdays, and inheritances. It is the entire history of the Schmidt family, strapped to their last surviving daughter's legs. Davies is the first to speak, his voice a low whistle of disbelief. My God! He gently touches one of the forks. It's cold and heavy. She's turned herself into a human safe deposit box. The absurdity of the situation gives way to a dawning understanding. This wasn't an act of sabotage or fanaticism. It was an act of pure, unadulterated desperation. Miller looks from the silverware to Annalise's face. The defiance is gone, replaced by a profound and shattering vulnerability. Her secret is out. In her eyes, he sees the story she cannot yet tell. He imagines her in the final, chaotic days before the Allied advance. The news from the East is terrifying, tales of the Red Army's vengeance, of looting, of utter destruction. The fabric of German society is tearing apart at the seams. Banks are closed, government authority has evaporated, and the only thing of value is what you can carry. For millions of civilians caught between the collapsing fronts, the future is a black hole of uncertainty. They will become refugees, prisoners, displaced persons with nothing but the clothes on their backs. In a small apartment in Essen, a young Luftwaffen Helferin makes a choice. Her father is dead on the Eastern Front. Her mother was killed in a bombing raid last winter. All she has left are these objects: the silverware her grandparents received on their wedding day, the locket with faded photographs of her parents, the watch that belonged to her father, a timekeeper whose time has run out. These things are not just metal and stone. They are her identity. They are the tangible proof that she once had a family, a home, a life before it was all consumed by war. So, in the dark, with the sound of artillery getting closer every hour, she gathers her legacy. She knows that as a woman in uniform, she will be taken prisoner. Her bags will be searched, they're confiscated or stolen. The only place she can hide her treasures is on her own body. She begins the painful process, wrapping each piece in cloth to muffle the sound, then binding them to her legs with tape, strips of fabric, anything she can find. The weight is immense, nearly 20 pounds of dead metal. Walking is a new kind of hell. Bending her knees is impossible. Sitting is unthinkable. But the physical agony is a price she is willing to pay to preserve the last remnants of her world. It is a desperate, insane gamble, born of the conviction that losing these objects means losing herself completely. Captain Davies begins the delicate work of cutting her free. With surgical scissors, he carefully snips the tape and cloth, avoiding her raw skin. As each piece is removed, it makes a solid, heavy thud on the metal tray he has placed beside the table. A fork, a knife, the locket. With each removal, a wave of relief seems to wash over Annalise. The physical burden is lifting, but so is the terrible weight of her secret. When the last chain is unwound and placed on the tray, she lets out a long, shuddering breath. Her legs, freed from their bindings, are a mess of deep indentations, angry red welts, and bleeding abrasions. She tries to bend her knees, but the muscles are locked from hours of strain, and she cries out again, this time from the pain of release. The treasure lies on the tray, a glittering, pathetic pile of a life dismantled.
The pile of silverware, gold, and jewelry on Captain Davies' tray represents a paradox. It is both priceless and worthless. To Annalise Schmidt, it is the sum total of her existence, the anchor to a past that has been obliterated. To Sergeant Miller, under the strict rules of war and the Geneva Convention, it is contraband. Personal effects of prisoners were to be inventoried and held, but items of significant monetary value were a different matter entirely. They were designated as captured enemy property, to be logged, tagged, and turned over to the vast bureaucracy of the military occupation government. While Davies tends to Annalise's legs, cleaning the abrasions and applying a soothing salve, Miller meticulously logs each item on a form: 6 silver dinner forks, 6 silver knives, 1 silver serving spoon, 1 gold pocket watch, non-operational. He writes down the descriptions in a detached professional script, reducing a family's history to a list on a piece of paper. Annalise watches him, her face impassive. The fight has gone out of her. She has risked everything,
endured hours of agony, only to fail at the final hurdle. The relief of being freed from her physical burden is now replaced by the hollow emptiness of total loss. She is just another prisoner, number 788-3492, with nothing to her name but a worn gray uniform. Her story, as bizarre as it seemed in that medical tent, was far from unique. As the Third Reich crumbled in the spring of 1945, Germany became a nation of human treasure chests. With the social order disintegrating, currency becoming worthless, and the fear of looters, be they vengeful foreign soldiers or desperate fellow Germans, paramount, people went to extraordinary lengths to protect their valuables. They sewed diamonds in the hems of their coats, baked gold coins into loaves of bread, and concealed precious documents in the false bottoms of suitcases. Women, in particular, used their own bodies as vaults, hiding jewelry and cash in their hair, undergarments, and, like Anneliese, strapping their entire inheritance to their limbs. You see it in the photographs from that time, the endless columns of refugees trudging west, away from the advancing Soviets. They carry so little, yet their movements are often stiff and awkward. How many of them were walking under the weight of their own hidden histories? How many women waddled in pain, not from injury, but from the burden of carrying the last vestiges of a life they were forced to leave behind? Anneliese Schmidt's story was not an anomaly, it was simply one that got discovered. For the American soldiers like Sergeant Miller, these encounters were a profound look into the enemy's psyche. They were fighting an ideology, a military machine, but in moments like this, they were confronted with the human wreckage. They saw not a soldier, but a young woman who had lost everything and was trying, in a desperate and misguided way, to save the last pieces of her identity. It didn't change their mission. The war had to be won, the occupation had to be managed, the rules had to be followed. The silverware was confiscated. Anneliese Schmidt was sent to a prisoner of war camp for female auxiliaries. Her physical wounds would heal. The welts and cuts on her legs would fade into scars. But the deeper loss, the severing of her connection to her past, was a wound that would likely never close. Her story serves as a strange and poignant footnote in the final chapter of the war in Europe. It's a testament to the extraordinary things people will do when their world is reduced to ash. It reminds us that when history sweeps through, destroying nations and redrawing maps, the first casualties are often the small personal things, the heirlooms, the memories, the objects that tell us who we are. Anneliese Schmidt couldn't sit down because she was carrying more than just silver and gold. She was carrying the entire weight of a world that no longer existed.